said everything was fine.
You talk about the adrenaline running back out on the court there and what that felt like.
It felt great because athletic trainer Q, he told me, he said, that's what we've been waiting for. We've been putting in the hard work, and he said, next dead ball, I want you to sprint out, and I did that, and the crowd was going crazy.
The rest of the game, coaches, you weren't actually favoring it, but you weren't quite. Were you thinking about it at all? I mean,
I was kind of thinking about it a little bit, and I was just kind of like going through the motion and kind of like thinking about it, but coach, he kept asking, was I okay? And I kept telling him I'm cool, and everything was fine.
When you first got in there, you wanted that one that came real low.
Trav, I pointed up and told him to throw it up, but Travis, I guess he didn't see me, when I pointed up, so it was all right.
So you heard the crowd reaction when you came out?
Yeah,
like
I said,
what did that feel like?
It felt great. I wanted to smile, but it was just like a sign of relief. Just the fans and the end zone and everybody just coming in and just clapping and just going crazy. And then, it felt great.
What did Izzo look like when you came and you talked to him?
He asked, was I ready? He was like, you ready to get back in? I told him, yeah. He was like, you sure? I told him, like, yes, I was fine, and got back in.
Obviously, Coach wasn't too thrilled with the final alley-oop, but did that kind of represent the I'm back kind of moment to you? Did that feel good to put in?
It did feel good, when I put it in, keep drove the lane and, just went up, Coach doesn't like, the showboat and everything, but, went in and, we got the win, so everything was fine.
So, Brandon, what did you do in here when you came in, and when did you realize that your knee wasn't okay?
When I first came in, when I first realized that everything was fine is when, against Ohio State, I knew I couldn't walk. I tried to walk, and it was, it wouldn't happen. And, Q, athletic trainer, he asked me, can you walk on it? And I told him, yeah, so I put pressure on it, and, everything was fine. So, we got back in the training room, and, Dr. Sheen was checking my ACL, and he said everything was fine. So I did like a light jog and some defensive slides, and everything was cool.
What did you tell Coach Izzo when you ran back onto the court there real quick? Was it just a simple thing, or did you?
Well, first, he said something. He said something to me. He was like, he turned around. He was like, are you okay? And I told him, like, yeah, I was fine. And he was like, are you ready to go back in? I told him, yeah. And just got back in.
I'm sorry if you already answered this, but when you first were injured and first went down on the court, none of us can imagine what was going through your mind at that time, and what you've been through already. What was that like?
A lot went through my mind, and the main thing that went through my mind was a flashback of what happened against Ohio State. I was just telling myself, please don't let this happen again. And Coach, I think he was more scared than I was. He was just like, please, just get up, please. So, I got up, put some pressure on it, and when I put pressure on it, I think I told myself everything was fine because the first happened, I couldn't even really walk on it. So I knew everything was cool. So I just kind of got scared a little bit, and just flashback, my body went through a shock. So.
And as you walked off the court, you probably tested it with every step.
Yeah, I did.
And it felt better.
Yeah,
better.
It definitely felt better. Because I was able to put pressure on it.
No, I didn't know.
And came back out, and our level trainer, Q told me, do a light jog and some defensive slides, and he was like, next dead ball, I want you to sprint. He was like, that's what we've been waiting for, put in the work, the time off when I was injured, so everything was good.
The game was close at that time. How is it to wipe all that range of motion out and go out and play some important possessions?
It was definitely, kind of, it was kind of tough because I think I was favoring it a little bit, I really wasn't, trying to do too much, and, I was kind of like thinking about it. So, I thought it was great, came down, made some great plays for our team, and, that's what it's all about, just, buckling up and just playing hard.